Hello and welcome back to Geeky Port, your safe harbor in the world of nerddom. I am your host, Jamie Horton, and I am here with my guest, Amy McFarlane.
Whoa, what's up?
Dragons is what's up. Up in the sky, threatening the villagers in their thatched roof cottages.
Good.
Yeah, they had it coming. So yeah, we're going to devote today's half-hour episode entirely on dragons. So yeah, dragons. There's a lot to talk about. They're featured in folklore, mythology, various movies and television shows, novels. So
and games.
And games, video games, yes.
And also board games.
Sure.
Or tabletop games.
Yeah. So do you have a favorite dragon? I was going to say fictional dragon.
Well, in my favorite real dragon that absolutely existed now.
The Komodo dragon or the bearded dragon. These are lizards that have the dragon moniker, but are just lizards, sadly.
I would say, favorite. If we're talking film and television, probably Pete's Dragon, because that movie holds a lot of good memories of childhood. But if we're talking like in terms of coolness, like I just think it's the coolest dragon. Was it Drogon? From Game of Thrones. Yeah, just because. I mean, that's cool.
That is cool. Yeah, I think. I mean, people love dragons in fantasy anyways, but I think Game of Thrones really did kind of reignite people's interest in that. And of course the Hobbit movies, where we got to see for the first time a live action, CGI, but a live action version of Smaug the Golden, which was very exciting, featuring the acting talent of Benedict Cumberbatch.
You did it. You said, I think, his name correctly.
I said, Benevolent Cabbage Patch.
Yeah.
Have you seen the behind the scenes footage of like him in like the green suit with like the ping pong balls, like with like a camera in his face the whole time? I think motion captures, it's a fun tool because you can become an actor in these roles. Like you literally like putting your performance into these CGI characters.
I truly do like to, in my own little headcanon, believe that they hired like a stunt performer to actually do it, and that was just a fun thing they did on set. They're like, yeah, Ben, just come in and just wear this outfit and do silly things, and they're just like, they actually need to do that.
Yeah. We're using all of this. Yeah, it's just the guy, just like the dragon talks. Well, it was his voice at least.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but yeah, with dragons like have rather pronounced snouts. They're lizard-like, dinosauric. So having it pronounce words, that must be a profound challenge. I mean, certainly in animation and like cartoon animation, like it's a little easier because suspension of disbelief. But if you're trying to pull it off in live action, I think the first time I saw that in live action was with. Well, no, I was going to say Sean Connery in Dragonheart, but Falkor from Neverending Story was a talking dragon.
Yeah, but a very like a dog dragon kind of plushy thing.
Yes.
Not necessarily. I would say like closer to probably like Asian depictions of what dragons were, as opposed to what we mostly associate as dragons, which is closer to Smaug or pretty much anything else, but
the reptilian look.
Yeah.
You know what? Actually, I was thinking about. So most dragons, I don't know if this is. I have done much research on this, but aside from like the Game of Thrones dragons, which are like almost like bat-like or wyvern-esque, they have 4 limbs. They have 2 legs, and they have the 2 arms that are also wings. I feel like that's not like the most common dragon type, like Smaug, for example, or like take your typical like European dragon. It actually has 6 limbs. It has 4 legs, and then the wings on its back.
Yeah.
So I just thought that's interesting. Like that's very unnatural. You don't see that in nature, like a lizard with 6 limbs.
I mean, I guess you probably, because since they don't exist, it's probably like an amalgamation of like a lot of things where they're like, oh, well, same thing with like a Pegasus, like where,
Yeah.
it would be a horse with wings. So they're like, well, let's just do a 4-legged beast and then pop some wings on it.
Right. Yeah, it's just what we've come to know as like the dragon shape, especially when you go back to medieval depictions of dragons in like statuary and tapestries and whatnot. I was actually thinking about the origin of dragons themselves. I mean, certainly like, obviously dragons predate, fiction, fantasy fiction. You have the dragon from St. George and the Dragon, dragons in Arthurian mythos, Arthurian legend. But what would be like the earliest versions of dragons?
I mean, there has to be probably some kind of association with, beasts of like ancient Greece and ancient Rome stories.
But you do have the Chimera,
Yeah.
which had a dragon head or a serpent head, right? Because it had 3 heads, I think, a goat head, a lion head, and a dragon head. And I think they breathed fire.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know about chimeras.
Okay.
But it's because I do know that the word dragon, I believe, is based off of mythology.
Okay.
I'm not going to speak like as if I know a ton about mythology.
Yeah, I don't actually know what the word dragon means.
I think it's like kind of in the same way of like the word volcano is based off of like Vulcan and like the Roman word for like fire.
Right.
So, or
Vulcan was...
Vulcans are aliens.
Well, yeah. But it is Roman, though, right?
Yeah, it is, because there was no word volcano before Pompeii.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think... I'm not sure actually where the word Vulcan comes from, because I think the Roman god of the underworld is Pluto, which is based on the Greek Hades. So I wonder where Vulcan came in.
Well, I don't think it's a god of the underworld. I think it's god of fire or sun or something like that.
Okay.
Again, I went to school for theater, so I only know so much about mythology.
Sure.
But yeah, no, so I feel like there's so much European stuff involved that what we know as to be dragons is based a lot off of Nordic mythology, Greek mythology, and Roman mythology all mixed together. And then it gets a little westernized because of Hollywood.
Right.
But there's also the fact that there is, Asian culture versions of dragons that are very different looking and very different in terms of like traits,
Have you seen Spirited Away, the Studio Ghibli film?
I have a long, long time ago.
It's good. But that they have like a typical like Asian dragon where it's long and serpent-like, but also has 4 limbs and flies through the skies like kind of like a ribbon, like blown by the breeze, and it doesn't have wings, so it just like flies like guided by the winds or like flies magically.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I bet that, and again, I'm no expert in this, but I think like the European perception or like the imagery of the dragon and the way it was applied to early stories, it was probably a mixture of like biblical sources, And influenced by creatures like the chimera and maybe the hydra, other like ancient serpents of evil in Greek and Roman canon, but probably the Leviathan from the book of Job, who is said, I think, to have a breath that kindles coals and blows with the heat of fire, and the beast from Revelation, from the Christian books about like Satan taking on the form of a serpent, to like conquer mankind. So there you have like even more like fire imagery. So I think like mixing those together, and who knows, like stories about crocodiles and whatnot, the creatures that people in Europe like probably had never seen, but like were just like making into these folkloric creatures anyways, and just adding these mystical elements like they fly and they breathe fire and they eat damsels. It just fascinating to see like how all these come together. Certainly in Norse mythology there is Jormungandr, the world serpent, who I think is the son of Loki.
Sure.
Loki gets around.
Yeah.
Strange progeny. And also Fafnir, who I believe is a greedy sorcerer dwarf who is transformed into a dragon and is later slain by the hero Sigurd, who then eats Fafnir's heart. And this is a strange bit of mythology, but like in eating Fafnir's heart, the dragon heart, Sigurd is gifted with the knowledge of bird speech. So he both understands and can speak two birds.
Is this something you learned studying mythology or just seeing the movie Dragonheart?
Both. I think I've always had an interest in mythology and folklore. And you certainly like you learn a little bit in public schools.
Sure.
No? Well, you did it the Bourne public school system. So hats off to you, Bourne public school system. You instilled in me the base knowledge of, I wouldn't say world mythology, but at least Western mythology.
For legal reasons, I won't name the school I went to.
Okay.
I did learn Latin, but nothing about mythology.
Wow. So you had, so instead of like taking French or Spanish, you learned Latin in high school?
So I went to 2 high schools. The first one, you had to take 2 years of one language, 4 years of another. So I did 2 years. Well, the plan was 2 years of French, 4 years of Latin. Spanish wasn't an option when I went there. It was just a small school. And I ended up doing 4 years worth of Latin within 2 years.
Wow.
Because I'm a nerd.
No, it's a beautiful sounding language. It's like the language of magic. And this show is flying by as if guided by magic itself. So believe it or not, we have to take a break. When we return, Amy and I will continue our fascinating conversation about dragons. Hello and welcome back to Geeky Port, your safe harbor in the world of nerddom. If you're just tuning in, Amy McFarlane and I, we are discussing dragons. And this will be the latter half of the show. We have been talking about dragons of folklore, mythology, possible biblical sources, but now let's get into the fun stuff. Let's talk about dragons of fantasy,
Media.
Science fiction, media dragons.
Consumable, no. It's like consumable dragons and then consumable media.
Delicious dragons.
I I mean, I will say there's a lot I have not seen, but that kind of is a blanket statement for a lot of things.
Sure.
But I do have a very soft spot for anything involving dragons. I don't know if it's because I always wanted one and was very sad that that was an impossible feat, or if it was just I just think they're cool, but just I consumed a lot of stuff with it growing up, especially growing up with Lord of the Rings and stuff too, and The Hobbit, having it through that. So,
yeah, my brother actually owned a bearded dragon, and I think that's really the closest you're going to get nowadays is just owning a big old lizard. I mean, you could potentially own like an iguana or something. Not a Komodo dragon. I think it's illegal because their bites are death because it just contains bacteria that will kill you. But what I suggested is like for his bearded dragon, he just have in the terrarium like this medieval scene, like with like little castles and maybe a little moat and whatnot to really like sell the idea that this is a dragon. But of course, alas, lizards do not have wings, so it'll never quite look like a dragon. It doesn't have the long sinewy neck. Neck. That's the new way. That's how I pronounce neck. Neck. It's Nyek. Neck.
That's the fantasy version of a neck.
Yes.
Because everything's spelled different.
When it's on a dragon, it's a neck.
Yeah. No, I put a lot of serious thought into buying like the Home Depot one that you put in your yard.
Oh,
it was like $900, and I went, nope, would rather make car payments and buy groceries than that. But, I have my own, I have like a lot of plushies and figurines, pop vinyls, stuff like that, including some of my favorite dragons of consumable media.
Yes. Not
consumable dragons.
Who can eat a dragon? I guess a bigger dragon.
Yeah.
Here's a question. Is Godzilla a dragon?
I would say no.
Okay.
Just because
He breathes fire.
Well, he breathes radiation.
It's
That's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like he's more his own thing or her own thing, depending on which film you're referring to.
Right. Yeah. If it's the American Roland Emmerich film, then that Godzilla laid eggs. So that was a female creature. Yeah.
But yeah, like kind of in the sense that Yoda is not a frog person.
Right.
Yoda is his own little species that we don't fully understand or know, that I know of. I'm not caught up. But I consider Godzilla to be their own little species that we don't fully know yet. And we keep getting those movies, so we might find out.
That's true. I want to say in the original film, the original Toho film, that Godzilla was defined as a mutated dinosaur. So, like to enlarge his form and giving him the power to breathe this radiation that mutated him. And I don't think Godzilla actually eats anything except for radiation. Yeah. So it really is like this kind of fantastical creature, or like pure science fiction. So yeah. Although Amy and I, we saw the new Godzilla film, or Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, right? Where there was another kind of dragon creature, Shimu, who breathed like a frost blast.
It was like an ice dragon kind of thing.
I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that was cool. Yeah.
But I don't think there were there's any
it looked more like a stegosaurus than really a dragon.
You're not wrong. Right? And of course, in some of the other movies, there's Rodan, who is a flying kaiju, but I still wouldn't call him a dragon because he's more of like a gigantic, like a colossal-sized mutated pterosaur, like a pteranodon, or and
I would say, like, in terms of, because there's movies like How to Train Your Dragon, which have hundreds of different types.
Oh, it's so creative. Yeah. All those
And
designs.
that kind of like gives you the chance to see all the different types and like, oh, this one looks like this and this one has multiple heads.
And they all have
this
fun
one-
names, yeah.
They all do, and I love that movie. It's so sweet. And I love everything about it. And I love the sequel. And I made all of my adult friends watch it when they made the mistake of giving me the remote for to pick a movie.
I love that Toothless is like seems like an actual creature because the movements and the whole appearance seems to be like equally a cat, a lizard, a bat, and maybe like a salamander. And you see like all of those traits, those movements in the animation.
Yeah, and I think that was also kind of by design for DreamWorks because they really did want to make it. They wanted to make Toothless pet-like, and like he was supposed to be kind of different from Dragon because the whole like beginning of the film is dragons bad, we kill dragons,
Right.
and it was like, but this one's different and cute and being like loving and snuggly. So I think it probably was they used, domestic animals as a footprint.
Right.
Blueprint, not footprint.
Yeah. Paw print? Claw print. And interestingly, Toothless is like a well-known dragon in consumable media, but does not have a sinewy neck.
No.
It's very kind of like it really looks like a lizard, like a lizard, cat, salamander thing. Yeah, like I don't think really any reptile has like the long neck. Like I'm trying to think.
Oh, well, I mean, technically turtles do.
Oh yeah,
But they
you're
have
not
a
wrong.
shell that kind of blocks it. But yeah, they can extend their neck quite far. If you've ever seen one without its shell, it's the most disturbing thing you could possibly see.
I will try to avoid that.
Yeah.
At Cape Cinema, we saw one of the Gamera films. So Gamera was like the competition to Godzilla in the Japanese film market. And what Gamera is, very similar to a dragon because he breathes fire. And I think it actually is fire, not some kind of radiation. But is essentially like a colossal sized, what are those turtles called? Snapping turtles. Yeah, because they have like the big teeth. But even more so, Gamera has these large tusks that extend like to the top of his head. So yeah, just a really fearsome looking thing. And also he can fly somehow. So why not? He just tucks his like little legs in and then like fire like comes out
That
those
sounds
leg holes.
adorable.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, so it's really interesting stuff. Star Wars, I guess, has its own dragons. They had the Crate Dragon from the Mandalorian series.
I'll take your word for it.
What other dragons are there? The Smaug from the Hobbit movies, and of course based on the novel.
There's the Reluctant Dragon, Puff the Magic Dragon, Pete's Dragon.
I've never seen any of the Pete's Dragons movies. So there's an animated version and there's a live action?
And there's a live action one. I did not see the live action one. But the animated one, it's just very cute. And it was probably one of my earlier memories of like watching movies. As a kid, like that and like Cinderella are kind of like the most forefront in my brain. And that and Poltergeist, but we don't need to get into but like are the most forefront in my brain. So like growing up, it was like kids love to watch movies on repeat. That was my movie on repeat.
That's fun.
Until I broke the VHS.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, you watch it on repeat and eventually it's going to fry through.
So my equivalent would be the animated Hobbit movie that was released on TV and later video cassette that was made in 1977. So a 5-year-old Jamie just loved that to pieces. just all the Hobbit songs and dwarf songs and all the fun characters and the fantastical environments. And I think that is what solidified my love of fantasy as a genre.
Yeah.
Because then, you read the novel after that and like all the different adaptions and of course Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion and all that stuff. It really is like its own deep dive into a cool, fantastical world. So,
It really is.
Yeah. Of course, there's House of the Dragon that's on
or
HBO
just
Max
the
or
Game
Max.
of Thrones Fire and Ice world.
Yep.
And I mean, spoilers. I don't know. Is it a spoiler if the show ended many years ago?
No.
All right. There was the like White Walker dragon.
Yes.
That was really cool. It was like zombie plus dragon and just scratched 2 itches. And I would say, barring the last few episodes, that was some of the best CGI of a dragon.
Certainly. Yeah.
And I will now base my judgments of any future CGI of dragons based on that. Because I'm like, if a TV show can do it, a movie should be able to do it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Then HBO Max, they threw a lot of money at that. No, I think they were just HBO when
it
they're
was just
making that.
on just HBO.
Yeah, it's gone through so many iterations. But now it's Max, which just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really cool to see like how people imagine dragons.
It's a great band.
It's a band. And certainly like you could look at something like Falcor or Drogon and like just say they're both dragons, even though they have vastly different character designs. And one talks and one is more animalistic, which is fun.
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Of course.
There's many dragons in that. One of the chief villains in that kind of world, if you set your adventures in a kind of fantasy setting that's pre-written, there's Tiamat, which is a 5-headed dragon. All the evil dragons in Dungeons and Dragons are chromatic. So you have red that breathes fire, black that breathes acid, white that breathes like Shimu, like a ray of frost. Blue dragons breathe lightning, and green dragons breathe like a kind of poisonous gas. And then you have the metallic dragons, which are all like the dragons of good in the cosmos. So gold and silver and platinum.
Yeah, and I would say my only like, because I don't play Dungeons and Dragons, much to the chagrin of my friends. But I do watch Dimension 20 and Critical Role and everything. My introduction to an actual dragon in Dungeons and Dragons was in Dimension 20's Fantasy High series, where it was the vice principal was a dragonborn, and then he turned out to be Calvaxis, I think was his name. Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah, where you can actually literally play a dragon in a game. Well, believe it or not, we've actually reached the end of our show. So I'd like to thank the viewers at home, all 5 of you, for watching our delightful show, and tune in again next week for another exciting episode of Geeky Port. Good night.